Welcome to The Drummer's Pathway, the podcast about music, life, and the creative process. Hello, I'm Michael Scott, and welcome to the Drummer's Pathway podcast, where we explore the personal and professional journeys of drummers, educators, and artists who've committed their lives to creativity and the arts. In this episode, I was joined by renowned session drummer Ash Soan and the legendary David Garibaldi for a roundtable conversation exploring the factors in creating a musical groove. It was a great opportunity to explore the ideas and perspectives behind what makes music feel good and why that matters so much to the people who dedicate their lives to it. In our conversation, we talk about the music that sparked their own creative journeys, the importance of exploring beyond your influences to carve out a voice that's uniquely your own, and how the shifts in today's music landscape are changing the way music gets made. And now, let's get started with my conversation with Ash Soan and David Garibaldi. Thanks for doing this. This means a lot to me that you're both taking your time out to join me in this discussion.
That's a pleasure.
This year I've decided to go through and have some kind of roundtable discussions rather than just one-on-one interviews, because I think everyone's got some perspectives and philosophies that we can share, and I think we can all learn something and be inspired by each other's experiences. The core element of music is the emotional response it invokes in its listeners, which largely stems from the groove and its various components. You're both celebrated for your creativity and your ability to bring music to life. So today, I'd like to explore your philosophies and insights on what makes a groove truly inspiring. So to begin, who are the musicians who fundamentally shaped your understanding of groove? David, let's start with you.
Well, here in the Bay Area, coming up, I mean, groove playing was there all the time. I mean, I grew up hearing it, radio, all the places that you go and hear people play was about groove. There wasn't any pyrotechnics or anything like that, so it was really about, being in an ensemble, being in a band, much different today where, you have influencers and all these other people, that really you can have a music career and not play with anybody, so it's kind of different, Yeah. I'm not criticizing that. I'm just, that's just the state of affairs. That's just evolution, But the groove thing, I mean, that was going on here, So I remember when I was 18 years old, 17, 18, my friends took me to see James Brown for the first time. And because he was always here in the Bay Area, he was always, always on the radio. He would come to play in the big venues and all that. So he was big, And when I saw him, his band live, we went in the afternoon into the venue, and there was nobody there. And the band was rehearsing. They let us come in, and we stood up. We went up to the stage, and we sat there and watched them rehearse. And they never said a word to us. We just watched them do their thing. And then we went back. We saw the show that night, and it was pretty amazing, man. I mean, it changed my whole music perspective, the whole thing I wanted to do, because it was all about groove, and there wasn't a fill within 150 miles of the place. It was all, it was all about groove and ensemble, and the vibe was unbelievable. These long grooves with no fills, and the intensity stays from the beginning to the end, and I mean, it was just exciting, I mean, they were sending it, man. It's still with me.
And sometimes in those situations, a crash cymbal will get you a dirty look. Because, Ash, what about you? Who are some of the musicians who fundamentally shaped your understanding of groove?
Yeah, well, groove, I guess, let me get the love-in bit over and done with pretty quick. So I discovered David in about well, it was 1989. It was. I went to college in Manchester, and I very quickly at that college there was a great bass player. His name's Neil Fairclough, and he was into two bands. He was into Tower of Power and Queen.
Wow.
Which was pretty diverse, but he was a fantastic musician. But he could do the Rocco Prestia thing, and I'll be honest with you, it was him that introduced me to Tower of Power, and I'd never heard anything quite like it up to that point. If I'm honest, that sort of playing the drumming from David. And just the tightness of the band, it was a brand new experience, because up until that point I'd listened to big band, I'd listened to a bit of jazz. Stuart Copeland was a big influence up to that point. Real true, this is absolute epitome of pocket. I'd never really properly been introduced to. I'd obviously listened to a lot of pop music, which does have a groove, but it was nothing like this. And this, the fascinating story about this guy Neil, the reason he was into Queen as well is his brother was a guitar player. And cut a very long story short, after being in Manchester at college in 1991, I moved to London to try and, the streets were paved with gold, and I was going to try and make my living. And amazingly, I managed to do that. So I moved to London in 91, and Neil was very much didn't want to move to London. He was very, the sort of north-south divide in England is even though England's quite a small country, culturally there's a huge difference between the south and the north, and he just didn't want to come to London. But he was one of the best musicians in our year, and he was into Queen. Because his brother was a guitar player, and he learned all of the records on bass and on guitar. And he's a bit of a nerd, so he would read who engineered the records, like who's the engineer, where did they record it, blah blah blah. And about 15 years ago, he called me and he said, "I'm doing a gig with Brian May." And I was like, I knew what that meant to him. It was absolutely incredible, which ended up being about 7 or 8 shows, I think. And at the end of the run of shows, Brian said to him, "What are you doing next year? Because we've got some more shows." And he said, I think I'm free, Brian." and Brian said, "It's a different drummer." And Neil said, "Who is it?" And he went, "It's Roger." And Neil said, "Roger who?" And he went, "Roger Taylor. I want you to join Queen." So my friend Neil he's been in Queen for the last 15 years when they reformed with Adam Lambert, which is an unbelievable sort of side story to where we're at. But it was him that introduced me to Tower of Power and David, and that was the beginning really with him actually, and that college of my grace notes were quite. I was 19, so they were quite new to me. Like, what's this thing that's going on that sounds really cool, but it adds something to the feel of the music. So I went down an absolute David rabbit hole, along with every drummer in that college. So David for sure was a catalyst for me to start getting into that sort of music. So that's the loving over. And I'm very, very, very honoured to now call David a friend, that's the beauty of how the music business can be, And then from that moment, I then started properly getting into Omar Hakim. I was already into Steve Ferroni really because of the Average White Band, and I guess Steve was one of the grooviest drummers that I was into, but it was still songs. It was Shaka and things like that. But regarding sort of like actual pocket playing, it was David, yeah, for me.
One of the things that you brought up in that was talking about grace notes or ghost notes.
Yes.
And so ghost notes are a fundamental aspect of both of your playing styles. So what's your take on the importance of dynamics in a groove? Because a lot of times what you find is that people will play parts, and some people will play the same part, but it doesn't resonate the same way. And a lot of it comes down to the importance of dynamics. And so what's your take for both of you on why that element is so important? David, let's go back to you.
I think the sound that you project when you play is really important. I mean, if you don't have a good sound when you play, a good conception of sound, it doesn't really sell your ideas, Guys that have that ghost note thing going on that's like a thread in their grooves, there's a few guys out there like that, and that have it really dialed in. And to me, that creates a fabric in your groove that can be really unique, the idea of the ghosting, and it's not just the snare drum, it's the hi-hat as well, it's both of those voices, and you create this shaker sound, So when I work with people, the thing I always say is to see the sound, memorize that sound, that shaker, and then you replicate the sound that you hear on the instrument. And you keep refining that mental representation, and then you just copy what you hear, you put it on the instrument, and it creates this little thread, this fabric, that it weaves itself in and around all of your accents and phrasing and everything, and learn how to keep that going. So it's kind of like this backdrop that's there when you're playing. And so you have all these different sounds on the instrument, and it's all this accenting and ghosting that's happening on everything. And it creates, a thing. So that shaker sound, see the sound.
That's actually one of the things that I learned from you is about articulation and intention. And sometimes when people get into playing grooves, the tendency is to just randomly throw a whole bunch of stuff in, which can sometimes help to embellish the groove. And in many cases, without the consistency and the intention, can start to detract from that. And so sometimes I find it's often been very beneficial to take some of the fundamentals away, make sure that's solid, and then using David's philosophy about kind of adding that shaker part back in, build back in, but make sure that there's an intention and a perspective about what it is that you're trying to achieve. And I know for myself, I've been guilty in the past of sometimes just adding ghost notes because it felt like the right thing to do. Now I'm very meticulous and intentional about that, and it makes an unbelievable difference about how that groove translates. And so for Ash, for going on the ghost note discussion, what's your perspective on that?
Well, I obviously I agree with David there, and to add for me, some people feel that that ghost notes just fill in the space, and it's for me it's absolutely not that. The intention. I think we talked about it actually last time we had a chat, and I feel the difference between someone that feels like there's something happening is their intention, and we did talk about it, and I'm that's one of the things that I'm really getting into now is like intending to play a certain way, and really trying to going deeper actually on less. Trying to make that 2 and 4 thing feel like solid gold. But regarding grace notes, I think of it as, like you just alluded to there, get the pocket down, get the 2 and 4 pocket down, and then help the listener on the journey by adding texture with grace notes. And that's, as you get more and more skilled and understand dynamic, that can be a beautiful way of making the groove feel like a landscape rather than just a straight line, I guess. And all the greatest players that we all love, they do that. It's like, and with the advent of AI, interestingly, you listen back to those grooves, Andy Newmark or whatever, and it's like it's alive. It's like it's even more apparent that it's alive now because we've got this change that's happening right in front of us. And so I think Grace Notes and Ghost Notes, it is definitely part of the landscape of the groove for me. And also, to help the listener get deeper as well in the music. And I think the great guys all do that,
Another thing that David touched upon was the importance sometimes of the sonics of the groove that you play, because it's not just what you're playing, it's the textures and the sounds and everything that you put together that makes that up. Because there's certain songs that we all love that the drum part may be very simplistic, but there's something about the character of that snare drum sound or the warmth of that bass drum tone that makes that groove so infectious. So it's not always about the complexity of everything.
Absolutely.
It's about the emotion and the experience that these grooves have on us. And it's amazing how we can all be inspired by different elements. What speaks to one might not resonate with someone else or vice versa, but it's essential to be true to the things that inspired and influenced you, because that's part of your musical vocabulary. And it's those experiences that you're going to take and that's going to allow you to help build your own creative voice. And I know for David, one of the things that you love is Latin music, and you're not necessarily known as a Latin player per se, but there's significant elements of that style that have been incorporated into the grooves that you developed over the years. And so how has Latin and Cuban music inspired you, and how have you taken those influences and incorporated them into the style of which you're known for today?
As you say, I'm not really a Latin player, but I love that kind of music. And it really, ever since I started listening to that stuff, because the Bay Area was like loaded with all that. We had like jazz, we had funk, classical music, blues, great Latin music, great Brazilian music, all this stuff. And so the way that the players grew up here, it was like fusion before it was fusion.
Yeah.
That's kind of we looked at it, So guys were always mixing things here. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of the environment that I came up in. And so I kind of looked at it as I got older and kind of understood more about what I was doing. I discovered that, of course, I have a default setting. I like the funky groove and all that stuff. Everybody has that. You have a basic thing that you build your playing on. And so mine was like kind of that funky groove. But I also like lots of other things, as I said. And so I've studied all these different things, and I use those things to flavor what I do. It's flavor, So I think that the more flavor you have access to, the more flavors you add into your groove, the more the deeper it is, the more exotic it becomes, the more musical it becomes, the more expansive it becomes, Just because when you play a ride cymbal, you may not be playing a jazz tune, but you may not be playing an orchestral tune. Mm-hmm. But if you've experienced those kind of musics, you can approach that ride cymbal in a way that is influenced by those things that you've experienced, music, the jazz and orchestral experience. And so with Tower Power, that's the way that I approached it, is I just flavored everything. There was not an overt, stylistic thing. It was more like a spice that you add, that creates things. When you play a cymbal roll, any kind of crescendos in the music, I was thinking like I was in an orchestra for those moments, and I want to send that out into the groove for that that moment, to create that thing that happens that flavors the groove. People don't know what it is that they're listening to, but they know something's going on because you're sending something out, in what you do. And I think that's, intention is so important to understand, man, the vibe that you send. When you sit and play, what are you sending into the music that you're playing? It's not, a sheet of exercises, you're taking concept to your gig, to the musics that you play. This is language. I can speak a phrase and I can make you feel good with the phrase that I speak, the way that I say it to you. I could also make you uncomfortable by saying that same phrase by the way that I say it, my intention. And that's all controllable. I mean, that's all, stuff that we can do. We can change that, at will. It's so beautiful. It's part of the, the creative experience, because that's what we are. I mean, this is art, no more, no less. We're creating here. Everything we do is creating. The way that we present ourselves, the way that we think about ourselves, the way we dress, the way we want people to see us. We've created that. We've created this thing. It's just not music that you create, it's everything. And so, all the parts are interchangeable. Everything's movable,
I think one of the traps that many people fall into is total emulation. There might be something that they love, and so they get into it so much that someone else's voice essentially becomes theirs. But it never truly does, because we are all unique and we all have something individual to say. But when you take the characteristics of the things that they do that you love and incorporate that into your own sort of musical cauldron and start exploring and experimenting, that's when things start to get interesting. Because there's music that I love, but when I play that style, I'm not very good at it, but I'm going to take elements of that and incorporate that into other things that I do. David, a few years back, you had put out a book that was essentially sort of a transcription book and an analysis of some of your favorite Tower of Power grooves. And my favorite part of the book was actually the explanations at the beginning of each one of the transcriptions, because it's from there that I got a better understanding in terms of your approach and what inspired you and how these things came together. And understanding where those pieces came from significantly made what you played that much easier to appreciate and to understand and wrap my head around, because I started to hear where those pieces came through and how that music was such an inspiration to you that you explored it, did your own thing, and created something exceptional in your own voice. And so I think it's important that we take those influences. We don't have to be a master of them, but just because you're not a master of something doesn't mean it can't become part of your own voice. Now, going to Ash, you play a lot of stuff with a fairly heavy reggae influence in that. I know a lot of that comes from Stuart Copeland, because we talked about that previously. But what do you like to do sort of with that particular style and explore on your own, just to kind of create your own vibe through that exploration process?
Yeah, I mean, well, I was lucky. London, is quite a long way from Jamaica, but there's a big sort of Caribbean influence in London. It's a brilliant cultural melting pot, really. And it's quite interesting chatting to Stanton more, about reggae and New Orleans, and he said, what's really strange is reggae didn't make it as kind of as it certainly made it obviously to New Orleans, but in its truest form, it never really did. The influence of that part of the world made it to New Orleans. But if you think about London, I mean, Bob Marley lived there, the Wailers lived there. It was like bands actually came to London. So I was very lucky when I first moved to London. I met a Jamaican bass player who showed me how to play a one drop properly. But getting back to what David was talking about, because that's a whole journey. You can spend your entire life figuring out what that is, and all of the beautiful spice and tastes like David's just got to, really, regarding reggae music. But it's the sonics really that I love so much, and you know, I've got I mess around with the delay. I love that as well, and what that can bring to the sort of creative process of it all. But leading on from what David was saying, I often wonder, it's not the what that people play, it's the why they play it that actually fascinates me. Like, why did they play that, and what is it that's where's that coming from with the individual, you know, when they, the musical choices they're making. And that's the thing that I'm really fascinated by, really. But regarding reggae, it's a long journey, and I'm still on it. You know, one of the misconceptions, you know, people feel that reggae as a pocket is, especially one drop, is laid back, but it actually isn't. It's far from it. Like with a lot of sort of groove music, you know, the drums. I very, very fortunately, I went to see the new incarnation of the Wailers, and the original bass player, Aston Barrett, his son, Aston Barrett Jr. now runs the Wailers band, and we put a track out. We put a dub track out recently together. He contacted me, and he loved my style, he said. So we did this track together, and it was really, really cool. But I went to see them play, and it was really fascinating. The drummer, like, it's so tight, and the pocket is as tight as any funk music, really. But then the bass, of course, can lay back a little, and the guitar player's in a completely, not separate, but another compartment. But then when you hear it all together, of course, it's absolutely undeniable, that pocket, you know. But I love that music, and I love the simplicity of it. And the you know, why does it feel, you know, it's really interesting. I played on a posthumous Bob Marley record, so I had to listen to the original drums, you know, from Carly Barrett, who was Aston's brother, Carlton Barrett. And, you know, sometimes he would go bar after bar after bar after bar and not fill. And if he did, it would just be, you just get a little grace note or a little drag or something. But then on other tunes, he's filling a lot. It was really, really interesting, like the way tempo affects it all. And I'm on it's a lifetime's journey for me, reggae music. I love it, you know.
Wow, that's cool.
I heard an interview years ago with Omar Hakim, and he was talking about how he learned how to play reggae music was to go out to reggae clubs and dance to it. And he said once he went through and he spent time dancing to the music and feeling the music, then he was able to understand it in a completely different context. And David, I think I told you the story years ago, but I was taking a lesson with Mark Kelso, and we were talking about Brazilian music. And one of the things that he talked about with regards to sambas was the importance of really truly understanding it first from sort of a cultural standpoint. So he handed me an egg shaker, and he made me play an egg shaker, like 16th notes in an egg shaker, while he had Brazilian music playing on quietly in the background. And we had a conversation for about 10 minutes while I was playing this egg shaker in this lesson, just talking about things completely unrelated. And then after 10 minutes, he made me stand up. And for another 5 minutes, we're still having a conversation about different cultural things in Brazil while this music playing in the background. And then Mark said to me, now your body is reacting in a different way. So now, because now it's starting to get in tune with what you're subtly hearing in the background. So now that you understand that, let's sit down and talk about how this music actually fits together. Because if you just read it off of a page, it becomes an exercise. You always have to look at things within the context of that. And it took something that to me was something that I wasn't really a passionate fan of to something that I really valued that much more, because I started to get the intention of it. And I think too many times people learn everything based on here's the 10 grooves that you need to know in a book, but they never spend any time listening to the music or understanding that. And I know we talked before about, I think it's essential for musicians to have an encyclopedia knowledge of different styles of music. You don't need to be a master of all of them, but you need to be exposed to all of these different types of music so that whatever context you are in, you have a better understanding of your role and a better appreciation for that. And that's how you start to develop your own style. Because if we're not going to be masters of everything, but it doesn't mean we can't learn to appreciate and love different aspects of it and steal from that the things that speak to us.
Okay, Michael, let me add one thing to this, which I never thought about really. With the stick people, we would have these conversations about this. And really what we're doing here is we study language. We're studying language. So you could look at each style, different style as a different language, the different hybrids within the style as regional dialects or dialects of a language. And so in school, when you learned how to write and you learned cursive letters and block lettering, maybe first, second grade, and the teacher taught you how to do this. You have a limited vocabulary, but you're learning how to spell words and write them. Pretty soon, the teacher backs away, and then you're doing it. You're doing the writing. Pretty soon, the teacher doesn't say anything to you about it, and you're writing. And as you got older and you continued to write, you're with your own handwriting, your own way that you wrote, your own signature. I bet not once did you invoke the name of your second grade teacher when you did your signature and said, this is a tribute to my second grade teacher, who I got this, knowledge of how to do this from. Yes. But what do we do? What do we do with art? And especially with this drum thing? We're always invoking the name of famous people, as opposed to vocabulary that you've learned to play, that vocabulary that you use, that's yours. We all got it from somewhere. Mm-hmm. I all got stuff from somewhere. All of us do, right?
Yep.
But if you're always invoking the name of other people, then it sort of takes away from the fact that you're doing this. Yeah. It's your voice. You're doing it. I had one gentleman that I worked with for a while who, when he would play something, he would always invoke the name of a famous drummer. Finally, I said, bro, you cannot do this. You are forbidden from now on to bring the name of another drummer into this lesson, because what you are playing for me is you. You're not playing them. It's you. And it's really good. And you have to realize that about yourself, that you have a voice. And I think that's important to understand, that we all have voices in this. Even the most undeveloped person, that's their voice. Mm-hmm. And you have to explain that to people and get them to understand this is what you develop. You're developing your voice. That's why you study. That's why you learn vocabulary. That's why you learn other languages, so that you can be conversational, more conversational. That's what we're trying to do here. Become more conversational. So anyway, rant over.
No. I totally hear you, David. I'd like to add another aspect to this is the word feel, of course, and that's also something that I'm incredibly sort of interested in, because I've had young people come to my studio and they'll just come over. I mean, I'm talking about people that have been playing for a month, and and their uncle or whatever will bring them, and they'll go, I mean, I won't name names, but there's some, where I am, there's a very small community, a village community, and people have brought people up, and I watch people that literally don't know anything about the drums really, and yet some people have just got a thing, and that bit fascinates me. Why is it that someone can communicate a feeling with absolutely minimal amount of skill, and then there's other people that I know that have been practicing and learning, and they've been doing this thing for years, and yet the feel of what they play is nowhere near as deep as, say, somebody that's technically half as good. And that is something else. Like for instance, I've been very lucky to see Ferroni play, and Hamish Stewart with the guitar player, Hamish Stewart from the Average White Band. Hamish will sometimes jump on my drums. He's not a drummer. He's a very good guitar player, but when he gets on the drums, you just go, man, that is like, and he doesn't practice drums. He doesn't know how to hold the sticks. And yet he just goes, and he just, wow. Okay. And it's just inherent feel. And so that's another aspect to this whole conversation that fascinates me. You know, that bit, the feel bit. The technique is one thing. Soul and feel is definitely another thing. And when you get the magic combination of all those ingredients are right, then I think, well, masters are created, and you know, as we know across the world, we can't mention them now. David said that, but you know what I mean. And or just people that are really great communicators of feel and sound and touch as well. The touch thing is, you know,
yes, sir.
I love those sort of. They're not mysterious to me, but I why people have it and why other people don't, that is quite mysterious. And this is where I'm at personally. You know, not the what, but the why. That's where I'm at, really.
Okay, Ash.
Yeah,
Ash. Okay, sing that groove that you just played, the one that Hamish plays on the drum. Sing it again. Okay. That is the sound. That's the sound of your drums, right there.
Right.
That's the way it. That's the way it sounds when you play.
Yeah.
So, Michael, sing that groove that Ash just sang.
Boom, da, boom, da, boom, da, boom, boom, da, boom, da, boom, boom, da, boom, boom, da, boom, boom, da.
See, you see the sound, and you can say it. That's the groove right there.
Yeah.
And so, you know, Rocco, God bless him, Rocco Prestia.
Yeah.
He knew nothing about music. He could even give a shit about it. He didn't even care. When he was playing the bass, he was playing the bass. When he wasn't playing the bass, he was not playing the bass. We would even have to, if we were off for 2 weeks, he would have to relearn some songs. And this is like songs we've been playing for years and years and years. But he had the ability, man, to play with a drummer, to play with a band like nobody's business. He had, it's like a drummer's radar. He had some sort of like radar that he could lock onto you and to a groove, and he hears the way that you phrase and the way that you play, and he would mimic that. When we first started playing together, I would make recordings of the rehearsals, and I was learning the music. This was in the very, very beginning, and I was here that when I would play on the ride cymbal, there's more of a legato sound than he would play more legato tones. When I would play on the hi-hat, very staccato things, he would play in a very staccato way, and it was this back and forth that was happening all through the songs. And so I was astounded. So I was asking him about this. I said, Rocco, bro, do you know that you're doing this? I explained to him what I was hearing. And I said, why do you do this? And he says, well, I just think that that's what I should do. That was his answer. I just think that that's what I should do. when he passed away, and Berkeley College had a online thing for him. It was Steve Bailey, Victor Wooten organized it. I mean, they were all there. Anthony Jackson was there. Ron Carter was there. I mean, they all came to pay tribute to Rocco. And they're talking about how, they studied him, but they just couldn't get it, and blah, blah, blah. And they always were trying to, they used him as kind of like a model, for the funky thing and all that. But, you can't teach wrong. And Rocco was as wrong as you could possibly be. And, in colleges, how do you analyze wrong? They're always trying to make something right in the music schools, being able to know nothing about music, but you can sing a groove, just like the way that Ash was talking about there. It's that thing. You see the sound, you hear the sound, you copy the sounds. Copy the sounds that you hear. The great drummers, I mean, these guys, they can sing that groove to you. You're going to play it just like they sing it. It's like a word. You can't say a word you don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, I mean, the phonetic thing. Obviously, there's a few cultures, aren't there? That like, for instance, tabla is they don't write it down.
Oral tradition. Yeah, oral tradition. Yeah.
And I think probably with some of the Afro-Caribbean things, I think it's passed on by singing it. And it's interesting that, getting back to Omar's dancing as well, that's quite an interesting way of like internalizing that thing. It's really fascinating. That doesn't surprise me about Rocco, really. I mean, man, what a player, what a feel. And it's interesting, like the whole groove concept. When is something grooving? Like you David's just explained it pretty clearly there. That it's when musicians collectively are connected like that, and they're communicating like that, and they've agreed that this is where we're all at, and they're so immersed in it that it is undeniable. The feel. And I think, going back to when we first started talking, and David was talking about what's happening now with music, with people. I think we're at a stage in the world where, I mean, I don't know about you, but I see people every day that can play things that I am astounded at.
Yes.
People, some of these kids, their technical ability is absolutely off the fucking charts. But then I also do then wonder the thing that we've just touched on there. Like, these people are spending a lot of time on their own in a room. The reason I know that because I do it myself, but I'm very, very privileged that I can actually go to studios. I've just finished Rod Stewart's record. I've been in the studio with Rod for a couple of weeks and his entire band, and we're tracking together. And that's what I've always done because I'm of that generation. But it's quite interesting, and I wonder that bit. I think people are definitely playing together. There's no question. Young people are playing together still, but there's also a lot of sort of insular players where they're exceptional, but then when put together, it doesn't quite work for some reason.
Well, Ash, there's something about being in a band that makes you think differently. I came up in the era like you where you're in a band.
Yeah.
Emilio and Rocco and his bunch, when they started playing when they were 15 years old, they called themselves a band. They couldn't even play one fucking song together. It's true. And Emilio, they called themselves a band. That's their thinking. That was the thinking, right? Is a team of players, right?
Yeah.
And isn't that the thing that we're so impressed by when we listen to great bands? What a great team of players they are.
Yeah.
The chemistry of certain players. You go see James Taylor at concert, and you'll see the same collection of players year after year for these tours that he does, and what they bring to his music and the collective vibe that they create in his music. come on, Tower Power was like that. We had, like a sound, a collective thing, separately different. I mean, collectively, man.
Oh, yeah.
Chick Corea, James Brown, think of it.
Yeah.
Bob Marley, all that,
Hard to have a conversation in isolation. And that's why it's essential when musicians get together that the grooves and the feel starts to change, because what you've perfected on your own, you haven't got the influence of the other voices that are coming into that experience. And then you start to realize bands that sometimes have a disconnect is because everyone's learned apart, but they forgot that the experience is really putting all those pieces together and evolving and adapting and having that conversation. It's the sort of the nature between the way music is made today, for the most part, where everyone plays their parts, it's pieced together, it's put under a grid, and it's made to perfection. And there's a lot of exceptional music coming out these days that might be built in that way. But Ash, you said you spent the last 2 weeks in the studio recording with Rod Stewart. So that's going to have a completely different vibe than it would be if everyone just sort of mailed in their parts, everyone put everything onto a grid, pieced them together, and then create something, because then you start to take the personality out of that, and it's really just a matter of people phoning in the pieces. And I think you can tell when you watch musicians play if they have experience working with other people, because they tend to play from a point where they're having those conversations. And I think that's something that sometimes these days is missing.
Yeah, agreed. It's interesting. It's a fascinating time now, man, there's some great, because it's not simple, because there are some people that are fantastic communicators. And that's, again, getting back to my thing that I'm fascinated by. Why is it that some people can just come out of the woodwork and they've got this incredible skill, not only technically, but creatively and in a communication way? The ultimate sort of joyous part of music is being able to communicate those ideas with your head and your heart and your fingers are just connected, and it just happens, and they're still, though, I'm seeing them and they're on their own in their room. So, it's terrifying if you think like, wow, if you get some of those people doing that as a collective, could be really amazing. But it's a fascinating time. It's interesting. We talked about it last time, I think. But some of the players that we know, their personality, that's what they sound like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I love that too. Be it Sparky, Stuart's like a effervescent. He's like a fucking comet when that guy enters the room, And funnily enough, when he gets on the drums, that's what it sounds like. It's like it's a runaway train. It's the energy and passion for life. You can hear it. Gad's behind you there. When I first met him, I was with, like I mentioned last time, I was with a younger drummer, and he was very, very, very open and very giving to this younger guy, and wasn't talking about himself, and listening and very inclusive. And when he plays the drums, that's what he sounds like. He sounds like he's listening to everybody. He's contributing to what they're saying. He's inclusive and bringing them in and connecting everybody. All of this stuff, as I get older, they're the things that I find more and more fascinating. Not the speed or the technique, because we know now that's just time.
Yeah.
That's just time. It's what happens at the end of that exploration of technique and the writing, like David was what's your writing like? My handwriting's pretty bad.
One of the things with Tower that for me, I mean, Tower was like the ultimate musical experience. When I first heard them, it was like love at first sight. I never wanted to do anything else. And, for my whole music life, I just felt like, was so thankful for the time that I had with them. And it was like the kind of the mountaintop for me. There was nothing else that satisfied me as much as, making music with them. And so it was, one of the things about it was that Emilio never told people what to do. He never did. If you couldn't do the job, it became evident. We were like a self-policing unit. If you couldn't do the job, it was pretty evident, and we'd end up, getting someone else, But you had to be able to play the music. That's the first thing you had to be able to do. You had to be able to understand what your chair was in the band, how you had to approach that chair so that you could fit with the whole. There was always listening going on. Everybody was listening, because that's the key element in any conversation, is listening. And so we had all that going on. Could you do that? Then when you weren't playing, could you get along with everybody? That's a big deal for us, because we were together so much, and we were kind of like a hippie collective. That's what we called ourselves, a garage band that could read music. And so we wanted people that we could communicate with on and off the bandstand. Emilio, kind of like the way that he would do it is, you never would ever say to someone, I don't like the way that you play. I wish you would play a different way. Never, 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 never. We never criticized each other. What I liked was I could look across the stage and see a room full of people who there's nothing about them that I would change. Nothing. Number one, the musical things. I wouldn't change anything, because it contributed to the whole ensemble, the vibe of the whole thing, the group speak, if you will, And to me, that was just such a great lesson, because if you want to have a band of people that sticks together, young people, I hope you're listening, you can't criticize each other. You have to learn how to work together so that you have this all the time, as opposed to this. No, here's how it should be. No, here's how it should be. No, the truth is in the middle. You go like this, so you make the music work. I don't know. That's my thoughts on that,
Well, it was very, very powerful, that collective. And I mean, again, another thing that I think about is how do some of the greatest bands in the world, there's something else going on when you realize that these creatives found each other. And it happens time and time again. If you think some of the greatest bands, it's amazing. And I don't know if it's a coincidence, but it does. The universe seems to put these people together, and and then they make this stuff. It's incredible.
Yes, sir.
And being, if you think about it, as a drummer, you personally, David, are a powerful voice, and then you put Rocco with you, and then that is more than doubled the level of pocket, and then you add the rest of the band, and they're all like-minded people, and you end up with a band that did what you guys did, and that's reflective of AC/DC, Led Zeppelin,
absolutely,
the Stones, the Beatles. It's like the same thing. That is incredible. That's another thing. And I think that's still alive and well. I mean, I'm seeing it with the younger bands for sure. So that spirit, or whatever it is still alive and well. Thank God.
Yes, yeah. Led Zeppelin.
Oh.
I saw them in 1968 when they first came to America, their first tour, and I'm telling you, man, it was. I still have, as I talk about it now, I can still see them on that stage, man. It was so great, checking them out, and hearing that, and just what they were sending out. It was amazing. Then I saw the Rolling Stones last year, and they're still 17 years old. Sorry. I mean, it was one of the coolest shows ever. And it's so brilliant the way that they do what they do, so that you don't think about them being 80 years old.
I know.
The way they present the music, and it's just how it's paced, and how they have a great band. But for some reason, you don't think about that band that's behind them. You just think about those guys because they're still the focus, you know. And Steve Jordan does such a fabulous job, you know, playing Charlie Watts, vibe.
You know, I saw him with Stanton in New Orleans. So respectful.
Yes.
Of what Charlie did.
Yes, absolutely. That's the word I was going to say. Yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think for me, one of the things that I've learned over the years as I've matured as a player is I've started to see a lot more value in space. And to me, the space between notes is part of the music. And when you get to a point where you understand and you value the space, then you're a lot more intentional about the notes and the things that you play. And it's all, at that point now, it's more about having a conversation, because when you put space in music, it's allowing the other people to join that conversation, and it means you're listening. And then there's always going to be situations where there is no space because everyone's got their own thing that they're trying to say and yell it, but they're not really giving anyone else a chance to actually participate in that conversation. And I think space in music, this is something that Zeppelin did exceptionally well, is that it's the space, the emptiness sometimes in that groove just made everything that much bigger and that much more powerful. So I think that's something that I've really learned to embrace and see the beauty of.
Me too.
I can't speak too much for leaving space because I'm always filling it up with stuff. So, but I hear you though.
I mean, you say that, I can think of a couple of times where you left some absolute beauties.
I guess it's there.
The tension, you know. What about that Phil in Soul Vaccination? When you know, when you left that gap, you know, the beautiful timing and the space. It's something that I'm really fascinated with myself now. With that, like, the tension you can create by not playing. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, and again, there's some masters out there that are really, really, really good at it. And that's another aspect, isn't it? And I'm as I'm getting older, I'm embracing the playing less and seeing if you can create something meaningful without playing too much. You know.
Well, that's the way Steve sounds these days.
Yeah.
You know, He's kind of removed everything
I know
that he doesn't need, and I don't know how he does it. He takes away, and then it sounds like he's adding more. Is that, I don't know how else to explain it.
Oh, I know, and he's not the only one. Because I think Steve Jordan's heading that way.
Yeah, Jordan's that way too. Yeah, he's kind of been that way for a long, long time.
Yeah,
you know, stylistically.
Faroni's the same.
Yes,
I was.
I would agree.
Steve plays eighth notes, and you're like, that is deeper than. Like, how? You know, my daughter can. He'll play a groove that my daughter can play, but it obviously substantially feels very different.
Yeah.
It blows my mind, and that's the intention thing that we were touching on, like making those eighth notes count, and like the depth of it is mind blowing. That's the area that I'm starting to embrace, and I'm loving it. And I think it just happens as you get older. I think that the sort of the deeper parts of playing any instrument become more and more fascinating, I think. Whereas, you know, we were all really, really interested in technique. I think I certainly, for one, tried my hardest to be the, you know, technically as good as I can. But then, you know, thankfully songs took over and I started playing songs, and it's good. Like, it's not so important. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Songs took over. I like that.
You know, songs took over, and then it's like, well, now it's not about your technique. It's about the most important thing is the vocal and supporting that thing. And what are you going to play to support that? You know. and it might not be very fast.
Earlier on, we were talking a little bit about how the nature of recording these days tends to be more piecing things together, everyone doing things on their own, and then putting in a system and then creating these collaborations. And a lot of the music under those situations goes through a process of quantization or putting everything onto a grid, which, when done well, can still have an incredible feel to them. But what's your opinion or your view in terms of how that process of making music has influenced the way grooves feel today? Is it a positive thing or a negative thing? What have we gained or what have we lost doing things that way?
It's interesting. Something happened a couple of days ago when we were recording with Rod. And he came into he's been with us, by the way. He's another 80-year-old, like amazing, like so involved. But he came in, so we're tracking bass, drums, keyboards, and guitar. And Rod came in, and we were routining this song, and we played it a couple of times. And the band's really great. The pocket was great straight away, and we went through and had a listen to it, and it was really, really good, but no click this time. And I just tapped it while we were listening. And I was because it felt really good. I thought, is this thing going to move or not? I don't know. And we pretty much stayed at 104. I think it went up to 105 for the bridge and then back down to 104.
Pretty good.
But I know it was pretty good, and I was like, "Well, that's really interesting." But no click, and then it evolved, and we started getting the arrangement together and things, and then it was like, "Okay, let's do it again." But hey, let's do it to a click, because one of the reasons, of course, playing to a click with on Pro Tools is that you can take the session away and you can add strings, you can add brass, you can add more keyboards, you can add backing vocals, and all of this stuff is easier to drop in and work with if it's in chunks, and you know what I mean, like quantifiable sort of chunks. And so we did one to the click, and I said it's about 104. So we did one at 104. It was cool, and I at that time I didn't really notice any difference until the next day, and we played them. We played them back to back, and all of us were like, oh man, the one that we didn't click feels amazing. And it wasn't a tempo thing. And so it really made me go, oh man, what's going on? Like, what am I doing different? And a couple of things that I came up with were, when you've got a click, your responsibility as a drummer is it's gone. It's not your responsibility to keep time. There's something else doing it that is unmovable, and it's like a freight train. You can't ignore it. There it is. And I think, very simply, the version of this Rod track without the click, the reason it felt deeper in it is because all of a sudden I had to then take on the role of just keeping this thing feeling good, because there was no click. So my responsibility changed, and I thought it was only a little bit, but I think that's one of the differences why the sound changed, because the way that I was communicating the time was different because there was no click. And I had to really communicate the time to everybody, the guitar player, the bass player, and Rod as well. And it's fascinating. I'm going to ask the bass player, great engineer, bass player, Kurt Schneider, to bounce me 8 bars of each. And I'm going to sit in here for 3 or 4 hours on my computer and have a listen and have a look as well, and just see, what is it? Is the bass drum loud? Is it as simple as just I'm playing the bass drum louder? Is it as simple as that? Are the 8th notes stronger? I don't know. But there's something about it that was all of us were unanimous. That feels better. It's really weird, but also, absolutely 99.9% of the music that I record and play was with a click and live. Live now with pop music, it's clicked. It's really interesting, that whole world. And I don't know, my thoughts. I think I'm in the right area when I say the way that I communicated the time without the click was different. And I've now got to listen to it again and figure out sonically what's happening. But I think that's in principle what was different, is that I had to communicate the time because there wasn't any. So, the bass player would have a little bit of clicking. Some people don't listen to it. One of my favorite things Pino Palladino said once, an engineer said to him, he was tracking with Manu Katché, and the engineer said, "Hey Pino, do you want some click?" And he said, "It's okay, I can hear Manu's." they were in the same room. But it's really interesting, so Kurt had a small amount of click because I used his headphones to put some shaker down, and I realized, wow, the click's right down. So he, quite rightfully, he's listening to the drums, but there's a little bit of click there. But it's really fascinating. That whole thing really, that was like something I've never thought about. Like, you're just playing. And like I say, at the time, we tracked it at 104 to a click as the arrangements started getting a little bit tighter. And at the time, I didn't really notice that there was anything different until the next day. And we played them back to back, and it was like whoa. Why is that different? Yeah.
When you and I were hanging out in London, we played Royal Albert Hall, and
yes,
you came over and hung out and all that, and we went to get something to eat, and we were talking, and I asked you about playing with the click.
That's right.
And you said, "Well, that click is like a little Irishman over in the corner."
What happened? I was working. I did a little masterclass at a fantastic music school in Cork, in Ireland, and one of the students said, "What do I think about the click? What do I think about it?" And I was like, "Well, it's not like a big ogre, like a big scary dragon that's going to bite your head off. I don't think of that." And I said, "I guess I think of it like there's just a little guy in the room that's with me every day, and he just, all right, there he is. How are you? How you doing today?" And he's always there, and he's part of the experience and my work, and in saying that to this lad, I realized, I'm pretty relaxed with this thing, because I don't know about you, but I really clicks don't bother me at all. I mean, it's just been in my mind all of my life. I've been playing with them, and I just don't think about it. It's interesting talking to Rod's bass player Kurt, who's very good friends with Aaron Sterling, and he tracks some stuff for Rod, and he said it's quite interesting where Aaron sits. Because he's not super gritty, as I'm not. I'm not super grit, but it's definitely there. And then he mentioned, and there's another drummer that was on the record too, on a track. Lives in LA. It'll come to me in a minute. But he was very, very very purposely great grid player. That whole thing, burying the click. And it's just very interesting how some guys play around it, and there's other guys that are very on it, and or maybe the bass drum's on it, but their hats and their snares aren't. It's great, and the beautiful thing about Pro Tools, of course, is that, like this is that Kurt was mentioning, was that you can literally see how consistent a guy is throughout a tune. Victor Indrizzo was the guy I was thinking of. Victor's great. He's like a beautiful, very much likes to bury the click. Whereas Aaron, interestingly, is, by the way, these people, and myself included, I'm not sloppy. But it's definitely, the click is part of the thing. The music's important for me. And actually the most important thing for me is the vocal. And I think you can get all of the information from the vocal for the time and the feel. I think it's all there, actually, for sure.
I think one of the things that I have sort of discovered when you're looking at these situations where you're dealing with the fact that many people will just quantize and fix everything is that it adds a level of indifference in the original performance, because people will go through and say, oh, well, that was fine, we'll fix it later. And it shouldn't be fine. You should play with intention. And, there's always going to be elements you want to change or you want to fix, but sometimes those things that initially you feel like you want to touch end up being those beautiful moments that you want to celebrate later on. The Rolling Stones didn't record things to a click, and that stuff is classic, and the tempos change significantly, and it just feels really good because they're playing music. And I think it's not about putting a computer thing together to make it perfect. It's about putting musicians together that want to have a conversation, and you should celebrate that. So it's a tool, but in many situations, everything is so fixed that it actually takes some of the performance out. I do some session work for some friends, and early on they would put everything on through a system and they would quantize and fix everything, and now that doesn't happen very often because they get the track and say it just feels really good, so I'm not fixing anything. It's not perfect, but that's what I like, and that music tends to breathe a lot more. So it's a tool, but it's something that I think we need to celebrate the performance, and we need to perform at the level of which we are proud of the thing at which that we have to say, because I think those are the elements that are most important. It's the human feel, and it's about having that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. Like I definitely, there's times, for instance, when I'm playing in here and I might put a video up and it's not been said, but I'm absolutely sure some people think that I'm quantizing my playing. But after sort of 35 years of playing to a click, you get quite good.
Yeah,
you get really quite good at it. Yeah. And the tightness in your playing of all professionals, really, most professional drummers that I know, they get to that level where it's like you can't squeeze a piece of a cigarette paper between them and it's amazing. But what's quite interesting now, I'm very much, as you might have seen, I'm really getting into the whole quintuplet thing, because I love the tension that grouping brings. Because I've spent all my life with 16th notes and triplets and 6 and 4 and 3 and like this 5 things come along, and I've gone, I love what they're doing, and I'm still experimenting, and I will carry on. I just love the tension, and then weaving in between 5 and 6, and doing it to a click too, by the way, is fascinating. The bending of the time, I really, really love it, and I think I've been enabled to do that because I have worked so hard with getting to nail a click, for my professional work. Every single Seal record, Billy Idol, everybody that I've ever worked with, Adele, everyone, it's always clicked. And I'm really glad that I've managed to sort of master it, really, because now I can properly bend the envelope, and I'm really enjoying it.
One of the things that I also was curious, and we've already talked about this a little bit, but for both of you, what advice do you offer musicians who are looking to strengthen both their groove and develop their own musical identity? Because I'm sure this is a question that you both get asked on occasion. So I'm just curious in terms of what your perspectives are and what advice you would have to offer. David, let's start with you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I would say, be yourself at all times. I mean, you can't be anything else. You have to be you. And I mean, and that's just the simplest and best advice I can I can give to somebody. You know, I mean, listening to Ash speak, you know, he's talking about how he's being himself. I mean, there you go. I don't know how else to say it. You know, you're you in every other area of your life, except when it comes to being being a drummer, you have to have this discussion.
Yeah.
You're you and everything else.
Yeah, exactly. A thing happened to me when I first moved to London. That thing where you've got your peers around you, and I had a moment for sure in the sort of mid-90s where I couldn't do what that guy could do. I couldn't do what that guy was doing. I couldn't do what this guy was doing, and like it seemed like every drummer in town, I couldn't play like him, and I was like, God, I need to be able to do that. And it was a sort of minor crisis for me until I realized, hang on, what am I doing? Like, what is it that I do?
Amen.
Because people were still hiring me, so I must have been doing something right. And it wasn't the fact that I was trying to be like this guy and trying to be like this guy and trying to be like this person. There was something obviously that I was doing, and that was the moment I realized that actually the song thing, it was singers that kept on hiring me back because they liked, as far as I'm aware, they liked my feel, and they liked the fact that I would support them. And as soon as I realized, this is what I am really, I should focus on the thing that clearly everybody else thinks I can do. Let's focus on that for a bit. And that's when it took off for me. You know.
There you go, man. That's it.
Yeah.
You find the thing that's you.
Yeah.
That's what you do. And it grows. It goes by itself.
That's right. That is right.
So, and the other thing about that is that once you find and embrace the thing that is you, suddenly there's a lot more creative joy in the things that you do, rather than trying to chase your perspectives of what you think you're supposed to do, because you're never going to be somebody else, but you can be inspired by the things that they do, but they're them. And they're never going to be you. And it's important to see value in the words and the creative voice that you have to share. And I think that's what makes all of us really unique and part of this community, because we all have something individual, unique to share that's going to be different, that hopefully can inspire each other's. This has been an unbelievable experience for me to get a chance to connect with you both again. You are both icons in my eyes, and now dear friends, and I truly value you taking some time today to share your expertise and your wisdom, and I can't wait to get a chance to connect with both of you again. But once again, I wish you all the best, and this has been such a pleasure for me.
Michael, thank you, man. Yes, thank you. Ash, great to see you, brother.
Great to see you, DG. It's we don't spend enough time. I will hopefully see you soon. I'd like to see you with some in warmer climes.
Yes. All right, Michael, thank you, brother. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Take care. You've been listening to the Drummer's Pathway podcast. Please share and subscribe, get the word out, and let's keep the discussion going. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.